The rain came in sideways that Thursday evening, threading silver needles through the amber glow of the parking structure lights. On the 34th floor of the Caldwell Tower, the entire open-plan office had gone dark and quiet, every desk abandoned, every monitor sleeping except for the corner suite at the end of the hall, where a single lamp burned behind frosted glass. Nathan Cole had been on his knees for 11 minutes, his toolkit open on the carpet beside him, carefully rerouting the power conduit behind the built-in shelving unit that lined the east wall of the executive suite. It was tedious work, the kind that required patience more than skill, and patience was the one resource Nathan had in abundance. He worked quietly, methodically, listening to the hum of the building settling around him, the faint percussion of rain against triple-paned glass. He did not hear her come back in. "I thought everyone had gone home." Her voice was low and clear, the kind of voice that had been trained, or perhaps simply tempered, to carry authority without ever needing to rise above a conversational register. Nathan looked up from the conduit, caught 1 second of her, and looked back down. "Just finishing up the reroute, Miss Hargrove. Should be done in 10 minutes. He heard the soft fall of her heels on the hardwood as she crossed to her desk. A drawer opened, then closed. Then silence. Then, after a long pause, "Why won't you look at me?" Nathan set down his wire stripper. He pressed the back of his wrist against his knee and stared at the baseboards. Outside, the rain shifted direction again, drumming briefly harder against the glass, then softening. "I'm focused on the work," he said. "You've been focused on the work for 6 weeks. You look at your tools. You look at the walls. You look at the floor. You look at everything in this office except me." He didn't answer. He heard her take 1 step toward him, then stop. Nathan. It was the first time she had used his first name. In 6 weeks, she had always called him Mr. Cole, with a stiff professional formality that he had been grateful for, because it kept things simple. His name in her mouth now was like a key turned in a lock he hadn't realized was there. "Miss Hargrove. It's after 7. There's no one here. You can call me Claire. Miss Hargrove." He kept his voice steady. "I'm an employee. You're the chief executive. There are appropriate. Why won't you look at me?" The question again. Quieter this time. Stripped of the administrative precision. Just a woman asking a man a real question in an empty room at 7 in the evening while rain fell outside. Nathan set both hands flat against his thighs. He exhaled slowly. When he finally lifted his gaze and let it find her, truly find her. Without the half-second redirect he had practiced for weeks, he felt exactly what he had been afraid of feeling. She was standing 6 feet away, still in her full work clothes, charcoal blazer and ivory blouse, dark hair pulled back at the nape of her neck with a few strands loosened by the long day. She looked exhausted. She also looked, in the lamplight, like someone who had been waiting for something she didn't know how to ask for. He held her gaze for 1 second, 2. Then he looked away again. "Because when I do," he said, his voice dropping to something rough and low, "I forget you're my boss." The silence afterward was absolute. When he finally heard her move, he expected her to step back, to restore the professional distance that had been the unspoken agreement between them. Instead, he heard her take 1 step closer. "Then forget it," she said softly. He shook his head. He began packing his tools with careful, deliberate movements, each one an act of self-discipline. "I can't," he said. "I'm a single dad. I work maintenance. I drive a 10-year-old truck and I eat lunch in the service corridor because the employee cafe is too expensive on my salary." He snapped, the toolkit closed. "I don't have the right to look at you the way I want to look at you." He stood. He picked up the toolkit. He kept his eyes on the middle distance, not her face, not her hands, some neutral point above her left shoulder. "Have a good evening, Miss Hargrove." He heard her make a sound. It was small and involuntary and entirely unlike anything he had heard from her before. A short, broken exhale that was almost a laugh, but was not, at all, a laugh. "You think I need your money?" she said. Is that what this is? He stopped at the door. I think you deserve someone whose life isn't held together with duct tape and apologies, he said. Then he walked out, and the frosted glass door swung shut behind him, and Claire Hargrove stood in her empty office with the rain pressing against the windows and something aching in the center of her chest that she hadn't felt in years. He had learned to cook exactly 7 things well: scrambled eggs, grilled cheese, pasta with butter and garlic, chicken soup from a rotisserie, pancakes on Sunday mornings when he had extra time, a simple green salad that his daughter Lily refused to eat but he made anyway because the pediatrician said to keep offering, and instant noodles, the good kind, the ones in the blue packets that cost $1.49 and took 4 minutes and tasted, in his honest estimation, like a warm fist around a cold stomach. Tonight was a noodle night. He set the bowl in front of Lily at the kitchen table of the apartment on Mercer Street, added a soft-boiled egg the way she liked it, not too runny, not too firm, and sat across from her with a glass of water. "Aren't you having some?" she asked. She was 8 years old and had her mother's eyes and his stubbornness and a way of looking at people that made them feel she was reading a document they hadn't given her permission to read. "I ate at work," he said. He had not eaten at work. He had eaten half a granola bar in the service corridor at noon and a small bag of pretzels from the vending machine at 4. The noodles were the last packet in the cabinet. Payday was Friday. Bah. Lily said she had called him Bah since she was 3. Some combination of the English pa and something she had made up herself. "Are you tired?" "I'm good, baby. Your eyes look tired." Eyes lie. She considered this with the gravity of someone who took all propositions seriously. Then she returned to her noodles. Nathan watched her eat and felt the familiar compression in his chest, the one that was not quite grief and not quite love, but was some dense alloy of both. Lily's mother, Andrea, had left when Lily was 14 months old. Not because she was cruel, because she was 24 and terrified and had made a choice she wasn't ready for, and Nathan had watched her go with more understanding than anger, which was perhaps the saddest part of the whole thing. He had called her twice in the first year. She had answered once. Lily had never asked about her, which either meant she had accepted the absence completely or had put it somewhere she couldn't yet reach. He didn't know which. He was afraid to find out. He had taken the maintenance position at Caldwell Technologies 14 months ago because it paid $3 more per hour than his previous job and included health insurance, which he needed because Lily had developed a mild but persistent asthma condition that required quarterly check-ins and an inhaler that cost $60 per refill. He was not ashamed of the work. He was good at it. He understood buildings the way some people understood languages intuitively, structurally, able to diagnose a problem from the sound of it, the vibration of it, the way a door hung wrong on its frame. The building spoke to him and he listened. What he was ashamed of, what he could not find a way to metabolize, was the particular cruelty of wanting something he had no business wanting. He had noticed Claire Hargrove on his 3rd day. He had been replacing a ballast in the lighting grid above the executive floor, and she had walked beneath him without looking up, speaking quietly into a phone, and something in the quality of her attention, the absolute, focused presence she brought to the conversation, had made him pause with the ballast in both hands and watch her until she turned a corner. He had not wanted to notice her. He had worked very hard, for 6 weeks, to stop noticing her. "Bah," Lily said, pushing her empty bowl forward. "Can I have more?" He got up and made her more noodles and did not eat any himself. And after he put her to bed, he sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and a pencil and wrote down the numbers for the month rent, utilities, Lily's inhaler, the grocery average, the minimum on the credit card. And when he was done, he sat back and looked at the total and thought about a woman in a charcoal blazer asking him why he wouldn't look at her. "Because I know what I am," he thought, "and I know what you are, and I'm not cruel enough to pretend those are the same thing." Claire Hargrove became the CEO of Caldwell Technologies at 33, Following 18 months as chief operating officer and a tenure track that most of her contemporaries had watched with a mixture of admiration and resentment. The company manufactured integrated systems, components not glamorous, not a household name, but profitable and stable, and Claire had made it more of both. She was, by every measurable external standard, a success. She was also, in ways she had stopped discussing with anyone, profoundly alone. It had crept up on her gradually, the loneliness. In her late 20s, it had been easy to dismiss she was building something. There would be time for the other things later. In her early 30s, it had become a low hum she could drown out with work, which was convenient because there was always more work. Now she was 36, and the hum had become something she could hear even in meetings, even during presentations, even during the quarterly board dinners at expensive restaurants where the conversation never went below the surface of things. The problem, she had decided, was proximity. Everyone who came close to her socially, professionally, romantically was performing something. They were performing deference, or ambition, or desire for her resources, or simple fear of her authority. She had become very good at reading performances. She was very tired of them. The first time Nathan Cole refused her tip, she had been startled enough to actually look at him. It had been his second week. She had asked him to fix the ergonomic chair in her office. A bolt had worked itself loose in the mechanism, and he had done it in 15 minutes with a tool from his belt and left without ceremony. She had pressed 2 folded 20s toward him on his way out because it was her habit and because it made her feel less impersonal. He had looked at the money, then at her, and shaken his head. "That's not necessary, Miss Hargrove. I know it's not necessary. I want to. Thank you. I don't take tips." He had said it without edge, without performance. Just a simple statement of fact. He had left, and she had stood holding $40 and feeling, for reasons she couldn't immediately account for, like someone had just been unexpectedly honest with her about something important. She had started finding reasons to request him specifically. Not constantly, she was precise enough in her self-awareness to recognize the line between interest and unprofessionalism, and she was careful not to cross it. But when something needed attention on the executive floor, she asked for Nathan Cole, and she found ways to be present, and she watched him work. He was not dramatic about his competence. He didn't perform it. He simply brought a quality of attention to everything he did that she recognized, because it was her own, this insistence on doing things correctly and completely, this unwillingness to take shortcuts even when shortcuts were available and invisible. He fixed things the right way. He left them better than he found them. She had watched him for 6 weeks. She had watched him look at everything except her. And tonight, finally, standing in the lamplight of her empty office with rain at the windows, she had asked him why, and the answer he had given her, quiet and honest and completely without performance, had done something to the architecture of her interior life that she was not sure she could undo. "I forget you're my boss." She stood at her window for a long time after he left, watching the rain move in sheets across the city below, and thought about what it meant to be wanted by someone who was trying very hard not to want you. It meant something real was there. She had not felt certain of that in a very long time. The trouble with denying something is that the denial itself becomes evidence. Every time Nathan diverted his gaze, Claire noticed it. Every time he finished a job on the executive floor and packed his tools and left with a professional nod, she was aware of the specific, careful quality of his restraint, the way he positioned his body to avoid the natural physics of 2 people in a room together, which, when left undirected, tends to orient people toward each other. He was constantly, deliberately, reorienting himself away from her, which was its own kind of orientation. She was not, she told herself, pursuing him. She was simply creating neutral opportunities for less artificial interaction. This was a reasonable thing to do. She was reasonable. The light fixture in the small conference room adjacent to her office had been flickering intermittently. She reported it on a Thursday afternoon and specified that she needed it assessed that day because she had meetings in the room Friday morning. Nathan came at 5:30. "It's the ballast," he said, having spent approximately 45 seconds looking at the fixture. "I can replace it tonight or schedule it for next week. It won't fail completely in the next 12 hours, but it'll keep flickering." "Replace it tonight," she said. "I have a ladder in the supply closet. Would that help?" "I brought my own." He set up his ladder and climbed it, and she watched him work from the doorway, arms crossed, coffee cup in hand, and after several minutes of silence, he said, from the top of the ladder, without looking down, "You don't have to stay, Miss Hargrove." "I know." "Okay." More silence. He worked steadily. She watched his hands, large, careful, economical with their movements. "Do you like this kind of work?" she asked. A pause. He seemed to consider whether to answer with a professional deflection or something true. He chose something true. "Yeah," he said. "I like it when things work the way they're supposed to." "What do you do when they don't?" "Figure out why. Fix the root cause, not just the symptom." She thought about that for a moment. "That's rarer than you'd think," she said. "Most people just patch the symptom." He glanced down at her, briefly, for the first time in weeks. It lasted less than a second before he returned his attention to the fixture. But in that second, she saw something in his face that was not caution. It was recognition. The expression of someone who has heard something that matches a thought they've had. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I know." The following week, she called him to look at a radiator valve that was emitting an intermittent sound. He diagnosed it in 3 minutes, needed to order a part, and returned 2 days later to complete the repair. On that second visit, she asked him how he learned about buildings, and he told her briefly, without elaboration, that he had grown up in a house where everything was always slightly broken, and fixing things had been a form of self-sufficiency. "My father wasn't around much," he said, still looking at the valve. "My mother worked 2 jobs. You learn to handle things yourself." She said nothing. She noted the way he said it, not as an appeal for sympathy, just as a fact, like citing the origin of a technical skill. "I learned everything from textbooks," she said after a moment. "I didn't know anyone in business. I just read until I knew enough to be useful, and then I made myself useful." He looked at her then. Not briefly. A real, full look, the kind she had been waiting for, steady and direct and stripped of the professional evasion. She held it. Her heart was beating faster than she was prepared to admit. "That's how you do it," he said. Then the moment collapsed, and he returned to the valve, and neither of them said anything for the rest of the job. But she was smiling, slightly, as she walked back to her office, and she thought that he might have been too. It was the second Thursday of October, and Claire had stayed late for a conference call that ran 40 minutes over schedule, which put her in the parking structure at 7:30 instead of 1:45. She took the side exit from the building instead of the lobby shorter walk to her level, and came around the corner of the structure's ground floor, just as the light changed at the pedestrian crossing on Mercer. She stopped. Nathan was there, across the street, standing at the edge of the small park that separated the Caldwell building from the apartment blocks to the east. He was standing in the rain without an umbrella, his jacket collar turned up, looking at something running toward him from beneath a tree. A small girl. She was running the way small children run when they're not thinking about running, arms up, slightly sideways, making the best possible speed, and she was calling something that Claire could not hear over the rain and the traffic. But the shape of it was clear. Nathan dropped to one knee and opened his arms, and the girl threw herself into them, and he stood with her in one motion, lifting her as if she weighed nothing, and the girl wrapped her arms around his neck, and he pressed his face against her wet hair and closed his eyes. Claire stood still. A woman was stepping back toward the tree, presumably the person who had been watching the girl, exchanging a few words with Nathan, taking a folded bill from him, departing. The logistics of childcare in a life running on a tight schedule. Claire recognized the choreography from watching colleagues with families navigate the margins. The girl was saying something into Nathan's neck. He was answering, quietly, his chin resting on top of her head. one hand pressed against her small back. The rain fell around them, and he didn't rush, didn't put her down, just stood there on the sidewalk on Mercer Street with his daughter in his arms, as though there was nowhere else in the world he needed to be. Claire walked to her car. She sat in it for 4 minutes before she started the engine. She realized with some surprise, not sad. What she felt was not pity, was not the soft condescension of discovering that someone had a difficult life. What she felt was something more complicated and more fundamental, a kind of clarity, a revision of the image she had been building. She had thought she understood what Nathan's restraint meant. She had thought it was pride, or a class consciousness she could address with words, with reassurance, with the simple declaration that she did not care about the differentials between them. She understood now that it was not about her at all. His restraint was not a wall built against her. It was a wall built around Lily. Everything he did, every deflection, every careful professional boundary, every early exit from a moment that might have become something, was in service of that small girl in the rain, arms wrapped around his neck. She drove home slowly, in the rain, thinking about what it meant to love someone that carefully. She told herself she wasn't going to say anything. She told herself this on Monday morning and maintained it through the week. And then on Friday evening, when the executive floor had emptied and the rain had returned, and Nathan was in the room on the north side of the floor replacing a faulty cooling fan, she walked in and closed the door and said, "I need to say something to you." He looked up from the server rack. His expression went very still. "Miss Hargrove, Claire. And let me finish." She took a breath. "I know about your daughter. I saw you, a few weeks ago, at the park on Mercer. I wasn't following you. I was leaving late, and I saw you. I've been thinking about it since." He set down the cooling fan. He said nothing. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't immediately name, not alarm, not anger, something more internal. "I don't care that you're a maintenance worker," she said. "I don't care about the salary difference or the job title or what people in this building will think. I care about the fact that you are the first person in 4 years who has behaved like a real person around me. I care about the fact that when I ask you a question, you answer it honestly. I care about," she stopped, reorganized, continued. "I care about you." The server room was cold and hummed with the sound of ventilation. Nathan looked at the server rack. Then he looked at her. Then he looked at the floor. And she watched him work through something. Some internal calculation that she was not privy to and could not interrupt. "I don't care if you're poor," she said. The word felt blunt in her mouth, but she left it there because she meant it bluntly. "I know," he said. "Then what?" "But I care." His voice was quiet and very steady. "I care, Claire. That's the whole problem." She took a step toward him. "Then let me. I have a daughter," he said it simply. "She's 8 years old. She's been through more disruption than a kid her age should have been through. Everything in her life is contingent on me getting it right, getting it stable. If I bring something into our life that doesn't work out, she's the one who pays for it." He looked up at her, and the steadiness in his eyes cost him something. She could see the effort it required. "I'm not gambling her stability on something that's what? On something that's unlikely to work." He said it without cruelty but also without softening. "You're the CEO of this company. I fix things for a living. I'm not saying one is worth more than the other. I'm saying that the gap between those two lives is wide enough that closing it would require sacrifices from you that you haven't thought through. And I won't ask that of you. And I won't expose Lily to something that falls apart in 3 months because we didn't think it through." She stood very still. "That's my decision to make," she said. "About what I sacrifice." "You're right," he said. "It is. And I respect that. But the decision about what Lily is exposed to is mine." He bent and picked up the cooling fan. He returned to the server rack and resumed his work, and the professionalism of the gesture, the simple, terrible return to function, was the most complete rejection she had ever received because it was not made from a lack of feeling. It was made from an excess of it. She stood in the server room for another moment, watching his back. "I'm not 3 months," she said, very quietly. He paused in his work, just for a beat. "I hope that's true," he said. "I genuinely do." She left. She took the elevator down to the parking structure and sat in her car and, for the first time in years, cried. Not dramatically. Not with any particular catharsis. Just the simple physical fact of tears, which was its own kind of truth. The next 3 weeks were a controlled demolition. Nathan submitted all his executive floor work orders through the dispatch system and sent his assistant, a young man named Derek Walsh, to handle any requests that came from the C-suite. He completed his regular rounds, logged his hours, ate his lunch in the service corridor, picked up Lily at 7:30, made dinner, checked her homework, read to her, went to sleep. He was very busy. He did not allow himself to be still. The building, oblivious to his interior life, continued to require maintenance. What he had not accounted for was the particular cruelty of small spaces. The Caldwell Tower had 34 floors, and he worked all of them, and it had a specific coffee smell in the mornings and a specific light quality in the late afternoon when the sun came through the west windows, and a specific sound in the elevator banks, and all of these things had, over 14 months, become associated with a routine that now felt he did not want to use the word loss, but the word was there. The other thing he had not accounted for was other people noticing. Gary Ashton, the facilities manager, pulled him aside on a Wednesday in the 3rd week. "You heard the talk?" Gary said. "What talk?" "People saying Miss Hargrove's been calling your jobs to other techs, saying something happened between you two." Nathan looked at him flatly. "Nothing happened. I know that." But Gary lowered his voice. "There's a guy in accounts. Brennan somebody been saying around the cafe that you were making moves on the CEO, that you saw an opportunity." The word opportunity landed in Nathan's chest like a stone dropped in still water, radiating outward. "That's not true. I know it's not. I'm telling you because it's making the rounds, and some people are saying HR should be looking into it." Nathan drove home that evening in a very particular silence. Lily fell asleep in the back seat before they got to Mercer Street, which was a mercy because it meant he didn't have to make conversation at the table, didn't have to perform the fine version of himself he always performed for her benefit. He sat at the kitchen table after she was in bed and thought about the math of it. The rumor would grow. It always did in buildings like this, in companies like this, where hierarchy was visible, and any deviation from it was an event. If HR opened a file, there would be questions, and the questions would become a record, and the record would follow him. He had Lily's health insurance through this job. He had the stability of this job, the seniority, the familiarity, the slightly above market rate he had negotiated after 18 months of reliable performance. He sat with his legal pad and wrote down numbers that didn't change no matter how many times he wrote them. The following Monday, he submitted a resignation notice. 2 weeks, standard terms. He told himself it was the right decision. He told himself this repeatedly and with conviction, which was the first sign that he was not entirely certain it was. Gary Ashton told her. He came to her office on a Tuesday morning with a facilities report and, at the end of it, quietly, said that Nathan Cole had submitted his resignation the week prior, and that his last day was Friday. Claire sat with this information for 3 minutes after Gary left. Then she picked up her phone, requested Nathan Cole's personnel file from HR, and read it from beginning to end. Length of service. Performance reviews all excellent, with specific commendations for diagnostic precision and reliability. Attendance record. Emergency contacts. The emergency contact was listed as Lily Cole, daughter, age 8, with a secondary contact, a woman named Rosemary Wallace, described as neighbor, childcare. She closed the file. She thought about the server room. She thought about the rain and the small girl running across wet grass with her arms raised. She thought about what Gary had told her regarding the rumors, which she had heard independent threads of, and had not yet addressed because she had been, if she was being completely honest with herself, too proud and too hurt to address them. She had been waiting for Nathan to come to her. He had been absorbing the damage and preparing to leave quietly, because that was what he did. He took the weight onto himself and he protected other people from it. She left the building at lunchtime. The address was in the file. She told herself she was simply going to clear the air, to tell him that she would address the rumors, that his job was not at risk, that he didn't need to leave. This was the professional rationale, and it was legitimate, and it was not the only reason she was going. The apartment building on Mercer was a 5-story brick structure built in the late 70s and maintained with the minimal effort required by the letter of local housing code. She found the apartment number 3C and took the stairs and knocked. He opened the door in a gray t-shirt and work pants, holding a dish towel, clearly in the middle of something. His expression did several things in rapid succession. Surprise. Guarded recognition. Something she might have called relief if she hadn't been afraid to name it. Claire. He used her name. She registered it. "May I come in?" A pause. Then he stepped back and held the door open. The apartment was small. She had expected that. What she had not quite expected was the specificity of it, the very particular portrait of a life assembled from limited resources and absolute intentionality. The furniture was mismatched, but everything was clean. A small bookshelf beside the window held children's books on the lower shelves and technical manuals on the upper. On the wall beside the kitchen table, a section had been designated as a gallery, drawings, watercolors, the kind of art that only an 8-year-old produces, pinned directly to the wall with small brass tacks. She stood and looked at the drawings. Figures, a tall one and a small one, always together. A house. A dog. There was apparently no dog, so this was aspirational. A sun that was orange, not yellow. A picture of what was clearly a bedroom, decorated with impossible pink clouds. In the kitchen, a small stack of papers on the table. Not a legal pad this time. Bills. She recognized the format utilities, a medical invoice, the minimum payment stub from a credit card. "You don't have to look at those," Nathan said from behind her. "I'm not judging," she said. She turned around. "I'm reading." He was standing in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, dish towel over one shoulder, watching her. "Why are you here?" he said. "You're resigning. You're resigning because of rumors that I could have addressed and didn't because I was too busy feeling sorry for myself." She kept her voice steady. "That's not acceptable to me. Claire, you're not poor," she said. The words came out differently than she had planned them, rougher, more direct. "You have 8 years of evidence that you are the most important person in a child's life, and you haven't missed a single day of being that. You don't have an abundance of money. You have an abundance of everything else." She took a breath. "And you've been protecting her and protecting me and absorbing everything and not asking for a single thing in return. That's not poverty. That's what sacrifice looks like when someone does it without needing credit for it." He looked at her for a long time. "Lily comes home at 3:30, he said finally. "I know. I'll leave before then if you want." "That's not." He stopped. He looked at the wall of drawings. He looked back at her. "That's not what I was going to say." The board meeting was scheduled for the 3rd Thursday of November. Claire had known it was coming. The murmur had begun in the corridors of the quarterly report review. She had seen it in the way certain board members looked at each other when she spoke, the slight recalibration of posture that indicated an agenda being maintained beneath the surface of normal proceedings. When Richard Calloway, the board chair, called her on a Tuesday evening and asked for a private meeting before the Thursday session, she understood what it was. She dressed carefully that Thursday morning. Not defensively, there was no defensive choice of clothing that would change what was coming, but with the particular intention of someone who has already made their decision and wants the record to show they arrived. Clear-headed. Calloway had 4 other board members with him. The meeting took place in the small boardroom on the 42nd floor. the one with the long table and the view of the river, and it lasted 47 minutes. The summary was simple. The company's public profile required its leadership to maintain a standard that precluded personal relationships that created the appearance, whether or not the reality of exploitation or impropriety. The situation involving Nathan Cole had been noted. The board was not making an accusation. They were outlining an expectation. The expectation, Claire said clearly, is that I end a relationship that has not, in fact, begun, in order to preserve a perception. Calloway did not flinch. The expectation is that your personal life not create liability for this company. I see. She looked around the table. And if I disagree with that framing, there was a pause, the kind of pause that contains fully formed, an answer that no one wants to be the one to articulate. Then we would need to evaluate leadership continuity, Calloway said. She drove from Caldwell Tower to the apartment on Mercer Street at 5:30 that afternoon. Nathan was in the kitchen. Lily was at the table doing homework. Claire had been there 4 times in the 3 weeks since her first visit, never announced. Always carrying groceries or Lily's favorite lemon cake from the bakery on the corner, always staying long enough to feel like part of the room and not long enough to presume permanence. Lily looked up from her homework. "Claire's here," she said, factually, as though reporting good weather. "I see that," Nathan said. Claire sat down across from Lily. "How's the math?" "Hard," Lily said. "Show me." While Lily walked her through the problem, Nathan made tea in the kitchen. Claire listened to Lily explain a long division problem with the patient frustration of someone who understands the concept but finds the mechanics annoying, and helped her work through it, and felt, sitting at that small table with the wall of drawings above her and the smell of tea from the kitchen and the sound of rain outside, something settle in her chest that she recognized as the opposite of loneliness. After Lily finished her homework and went to her room with a promise to be back for dinner, Nathan brought 2 mugs to the table and sat across from her. "The board meeting was today," she said. He looked at her. "They told me to make a choice." His expression was very careful. "Claire, I already made it." She curled both hands around her mug. "I resigned this afternoon, effective in 30 days, with a transition period and clean terms. I have a non-compete in the technical sector for 18 months, which I've already talked to a lawyer about, and which is narrower than they'd like." She looked up at him. "I have savings. I have a clear idea of what I want to do next, and I am not your boss anymore." The silence was complete. Nathan set down his mug. He looked at the table. Then he looked at her, and the careful expressional management of the past 3 months came apart, not dramatically, not in any way that could be described as a collapse, but the way a held breath releases, fully and without remainder. "Why would you do that?" he said. "Because I choose you." She said it simply. "And Lily. And this table. And long division." A brief pause. "And because I think you've been so busy protecting everyone else that you forgot you're allowed to want things too." His jaw was tight. His eyes were very bright. "I said I couldn't love you," he said, very quietly. "You said you didn't have the right to." "Same thing." "It absolutely is not the same thing." She leaned forward slightly. "You have the right. You've had it the whole time. You just couldn't see past the fear long enough to use it." From down the hall, Lily's voice. "Is dinner soon?" "I'm hungry." Claire looked at Nathan. Nathan looked at Claire. Something passed between them, something that did not need to be named because it was simply present, as solid and actual as the table between them. "What do you want for dinner?" Nathan called back. A pause. Then, "Can Claire make the pasta thing she made last time?" Nathan looked at Claire. There was the beginning of something in his face, slow, cautious, real. "I can make the pasta thing," Claire said. She got up and went to the kitchen, and Nathan followed. And behind them, the rain pressed against the windows of the apartment on Mercer Street. The same rain that had been there at the beginning of this thing, constant and indifferent, and somehow, in its persistence, like a benediction. They did not rush. This was, in Claire's later estimation, the thing that saved them. They had both seen the particular damage of velocity, of wanting outrunning readiness, of commitment made before the full picture was assembled, and so they proceeded with the care of two people building something they intended to keep. The first month was adjustment. Claire worked from home on the consulting framework she had been quietly mapping for 2 years. Technical operations strategy for mid-size manufacturers, leveraging the network she had built at Caldwell. Nathan finished his notice period and took a position at a facilities management company that contracted with 3 downtown buildings. A role that paid slightly more and carried, crucially, no layered professional complications. They had dinner together twice a week, sometimes 3 times. Claire learned Lily's preferences. The lemon cake, yes. The green salad, still no. Audiobooks on road trips. The complete and serious privacy of her drawings, which were not to be commented on unless she offered them. Lily, for her part, regarded Claire with the evaluative precision of someone who had learned early that new people in a life required assessment before investment. She watched Claire for approximately 6 weeks before deciding, apparently on a Thursday over long division, that the assessment was complete and favorable. The first evidence of this was when she started leaving her drawings on the kitchen table, face up, where Claire would see them. Nathan saw it before Claire did. He didn't say anything. In the spring, Claire opened the consulting practice Hargrove Operations Group, a deliberately unflashy name from a small office 2 blocks from Mercer Street. The first 3 clients came from former colleagues who had watched her work for years and needed no convincing. By summer, she had a waiting list. Nathan fixed things. He fixed them well and carefully and without shortcuts. He picked Lily up at 3:30 on the days he had early shifts and at 7:30 on the days he had late ones. He made pasta with butter and garlic and scrambled eggs and pancakes on Sunday mornings and a green salad that Lily had, by the end of the second summer, begun eating without complaint. There were hard patches. There were weeks when the logistics of 2 separate lives and 1 child's schedule required more coordination than was comfortable. There were moments when the old fears surfaced, his, about being enough. Hers, about the vulnerability of having chosen something specific over something safe. There were disagreements about small things that were really about large things, and they had those disagreements without the blunt instruments of withdrawal or silence. They talked. This was, it turned out, the central skill of the whole endeavor. On the first Saturday of October 2 years, nearly exactly, from a rainy Thursday evening in a 34th floor office, Nathan took Lily and Claire to the park on Mercer, the same small park where Claire had first seen the 2 of them together, and they walked the path around the pond and bought coffee from the cart near the entrance and sat on a bench with Lily between them, watching the ducks. Lily was 10 now. She had her father's methodical way of observing things. She was watching the ducks with the focused curiosity she brought to most phenomena. "Claire," she said, not looking up from the ducks. "Yeah? Are you and Ba going to get married?" A pause. Nathan looked at the ducks. Claire looked at Nathan. Nathan looked at Claire. "We've been talking about it," Claire said. Lily considered this. "I would be the flower girl," she said. Obviously, Nathan agreed. "And I want the dog." "The dog is a separate conversation," Nathan said. "It should be part of the marriage conversation," Lily said, with the tone of someone who has thought about the negotiating leverage of a wedding and is prepared to use it fully. Claire laughed, a real laugh, loose and unguarded, the kind she had not regularly produced for a very long time before this apartment, this table, this small person sitting between them. Nathan looked at her while she was laughing. He looked at her the way he had been trying not to look at her for months, in a building 34 floors above this park, and she caught him looking, and neither of them looked away. The wedding was in April, on a Saturday when the light was the particular clear gold of early spring, when the trees along Mercer Street had just broken into thin green. It was held in the backyard of a friend's house, not large, not photographed professionally, not designed for anything except the gathering of people who were genuinely glad for the two people at the center of it. Claire wore a simple ivory dress with no train, chosen because she wanted to be able to move freely. Nathan wore a dark suit he had bought new, because he had decided, quietly and without making an announcement of it, that this was a day that deserved new things. Lily was the flower girl. She took the role with extreme seriousness, walking the improvised aisle between folding chairs with the gravity of someone carrying state documents, dropping rose petals with precision at regular intervals, and arriving at the front with the posture of a person who has completed a mission. She stood beside her father during the vows, holding his hand. Nathan spoke first. He was not a man who made speeches. He had thought about what he wanted to say for weeks and eventually decided to say the true thing plainly, which was what he always did. "I told myself I didn't have the right to love you," he said. "I thought love was something you had to earn by having enough stability, enough certainty, enough to offer." He paused. "You taught me that that's not what it is. You showed up with groceries and long division and the absolute refusal to accept any version of me that was less than what I actually was. I don't have the words for what that cost you, but I have the rest of my life to try to deserve it." Claire listened to this with her eyes very bright and her hands very steady. "You were protecting everything that mattered to you," she said. "You were doing it alone, without asking for help, because you didn't think you were allowed to ask. And I watched that and I thought that's someone who knows what things are worth." She glanced down at Lily, who was watching this exchange with the absolute attention of a person taking detailed notes. "And then I met the other person who knew what you were worth, and that settled it." Lily looked up. "That's me," she informed the assembled guests. There was laughter. Nathan pressed his face briefly against the top of Lily's head. Claire took his hand. Later, after the food, after the dancing on the uneven grass, after Lily had fallen asleep in her dress on a borrowed couch, and Nathan had carried her to the car, Claire sat in the passenger seat while Nathan drove home through the spring evening and the city moved past the windows in its familiar way, all light and movement and the ordinary ongoing business of a world that doesn't pause for private significance. She looked at him driving. She thought about a rainy Thursday evening 2 years ago, and a man on his knees in an empty office, trying very hard not to look at her. "Hey," she said. He glanced over. "Thank you for looking," she said. He took her hand across the center console. His grip was the same as everything else about him. Steady, careful, complete. "I was always looking," he said. "I just couldn't let you see it." "I know," she said. "I saw it anyway." Outside, the city moved past in amber and silver, and the trees on Mercer Street cast long shadows in the late light. And in the back seat, Lily slept with her head against the window, rose petals still clinging to the hem of her dress. The world did not make any particular announcement about any of this. It didn't need to. But if you had asked Nathan Cole, sometime later, to describe the moment he understood what he had been afraid of, the real fear, beneath all the practical fears, beneath the money and the job title and the logistics, he would have said something quiet and probably surprised you with its simplicity. He had not been afraid of loving Claire. He had been afraid of showing Lily that love was possible, because if he showed her that, and it failed, she would learn the lesson he had been carrying since he was 22 years old and watching Andrea drive away in a car full of boxes, that love is a debt that comes due in the worst possible currency, and he would rather she never have the thing than have it taken from her. What he had not understood, until Claire stood in his kitchen and made pasta and stayed through the long division and came back and came back and came back, was that the lesson worked in both directions. That if he never showed Lily love working, love staying, love choosing, love doing the quiet daily work of a life, she would learn that lesson instead. He had thought he was protecting her. He had been withholding the most important thing he had to teach her. He thought about this sometimes in the evenings, after Claire was reading and Lily was asleep, and the apartment on Mercer Street was quiet, with the specific quality of a space that has been lived in fully, every corner occupied by the weight of a life in actual use. He would sit at the kitchen table, his legal pad usually in front of him, the numbers that had once been so frightening, now merely the ordinary arithmetic of a life that was working, and he would look at the wall of Lily's drawings, which had expanded and migrated and now covered a significant portion of the kitchen wall, and had begun creeping into the hallway. The drawings had changed over the years. The early ones were simple: tall figure, small figure, the orange sun. Then a third figure appeared taller than the small one, same height as the tall one. Then a dog that was still aspirational but had acquired a name, Captain, written in careful letters beneath it, in anticipation of a negotiation that was still technically ongoing. Then, in the most recent drawings, something that Nathan couldn't quite name. A quality of ease in the composition, a looseness, as though the hand producing them had stopped working out how things should be arranged and was simply recording how they were. How they were was together. He thought that was enough. He thought, sitting at the kitchen table in the quiet evenings, that it was, in fact, more than enough, that it was the kind of thing that most people, if they were fortunate, managed to build once in a lifetime, and that he had almost refused it out of an excess of caution that he had called love, but that had been, if he was completely honest, fear wearing love's clothing. He would not make that mistake again. That was the thing he wanted Lily to learn.